Hi, my name is Luz Duran, and today our group will be discussing 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. Now, before we dive into the poem, I want to talk to you a little bit about the author of this poem, Wallace Stevens. So, Mr. Wallace Stevens was born in Reading, Pennsylvania on October 2nd, 1879. In 1903, he graduated from New York Law School. Then in 1908, he was offered a job by the American Bonding Company as a lawyer. In 1916, he moved to Hartford, Connecticut. After a merger took place with his previous employer, he joined Hartford Accident and Indemnity Company. So Stephen was a business lawyer by day, and during his free time, he was a writer. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his collected poems in 1955. He also won twice the National Book Award for Poetry. At the age of 44, he published his first book, Harmonium, which consists of 85 poems, one of them being 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. His second recognized work, for which he won the Pulitzer Prize, is The Idea of Order at the Key West poem. Stephen personally met philosopher, essayist, poet, novelist George Santayana, and Wallace was influenced by Santayana's book called Interpretations of Poetry. Here, let's move on to the next slide. Talk about the type of poetry wrote. Let's see, Stevens. So Mr. Stevens, literary movement was modernism. And modernist poets, their desire was to break from the past, rejecting literary traditions that were too soft to be in an era of technological advancement and global violence. Wallace was a modern poet that cared more for the transformative power of the imagination. His poetry will be considered a metaphysical poetry. And what metaphysical poetry is pretty much it consists of unusual and deliberate orchestrated metaphors and similes. The philosophical perspective describes the relationships between physical world and consciousness. It questions the nature of reality. It emphasizes on personal experience and how perspective shapes meaning. It seeks to awake the reader from his or her normal existence in order to question the unquestionable. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read the poem to you. 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. I was of 3 minds, like a tree, in which there are 3 blackbirds. The blackbird whirled in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. A man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. I do not know which to prefer, the beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos, the blackbird whistling or just after. Icicles filled the long window with barbaric glass. The shadow of the blackbird crossed it to and fro, the mood, traced in the shadow in indecipherable costs. O thin men of Hatem, why do you imagine golden birds? Do you not see how the blackbird walks around the feet of the women about you? I know noble accents and lucid, inescapable rhythms, but I know too that the blackbird is involved in what I know. When the blackbird flew out of sight, it marked the edge of one of many circles. At the sight of blackbirds flying in a green light, Even the bouts of euphony would cry out sharply. He rode over Connecticut in a glass coach. Once a fear pierced him in that he mistook the shadow of his equipage for Blackbird's. The river is moving. The Blackbird must be flying. It was evening all afternoon. It was snowing and it was going to snow. The Blackbird sat in the cedar limbs. So, let's talk a little bit about the context of this poem. So, the poem is not set on a specific time. It was published between World War I and World War II. Stanza 11 mentions a glass coach. These type of coaches existed late 19th hundreds and early 20th century, and then soon replaced by automobiles. Now, the place. In stanza 7, the speaker is questioning the men of Haddam. Haddam is a city from Connecticut, and Wallace Stevens lived in Connecticut, so that could be the place where this poem takes place. The setting of this poem, natural world, is front and center in this poem. Reading through the poem, the cycle of seasons is visible. You have the snowy mountains, winter, then you have the tree with spring, and then the autumn winds. And then, of course, the blackbird is flying away, which is migrating. And then, you see the river moving, therefore, the blackbird has returned. And then we have the evening all afternoon snowing. It means the season has passed and the blackbird's still present. So, definitely, you have the landscapes, you have the season changing. And then, of course, you have the blackbird being part of all of this. You see it through each stanza, how everything connects. There was an article called in the New Yorker, Insurance Man, The Life and Art of Wallace Stevens, written by Peter Shadell. I apologize. I'm sure that I mispronounced the last name. But he describes Stevens' poetry as projecting his struggles as abstract patterns of human and beyond human, of natural and metaphysical existence. So the discussion question that I have is, reading through the poem, what abstract concept can you identify? Be perceptive. Let's move on to the poem's theme. So the main topics, as described earlier, are nature and simplicity. And the theme of this poem is, through the cycle of life, enjoy the simplicity that surrounds us and connects us all. If you don't, life will take the opportunity from you before you know it. Thank you. My next group member will be discussing the figurative language of the poem.